Hi guys, it's me, Beazulbub, and I clearly have no idea what the fuck I'm doing because I'm reviewing this movie. 1992's film, Candyman, directed by Bernard Rose and starring Tony Todd, Virginia Madsen, Xander Berkeley and Cassie Lemons. The most difficult part about reviewing this film is this. Everyone has reviewed it. Everyone has spoken about it. Everyone has deconstructed it academically and blah, 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 blah. So for me to just give you a rehash of this film is completely redundant. So what I'm going to try and do today is basically discuss some of the elements which appeal to me personally, because as we all know, watching a film is completely subjective. So here we go. Oh, by the way, this will have spoilers, so if you have not seen this 20-plus-year-old film, there's your warning. Go out and see it. So without further ado, let's get going. Okay, so clearly when people think of Candyman, they think of the character of Candyman, played by Tony Todd. Now, this has to be one of the finest performances I have seen in a horror movie, because there's just something about Tony Todd in this film which is completely mesmerizing. And I'm not just talking about the hook and the hypnosis that he weaves on Virginia Madsen's character Helen. No, everything about Tony Todd in this film is about power. You never see him slump. Okay, when you first see him, he is standing like this, hands behind his back, legs slightly spread apart, and not relinquishing any power whatsoever. Candyman is a symbol of this. He is a symbol of legacy, of potency, of transcending the human coil. And just the way Todd is able to just stand there and express himself and use that wonderful voice of his. Now, yes, it has been somewhat doctored just for the purpose of making the character seem more supernatural than he actually is. But this is all Tony Todd. Tony Todd is a visual effect in of himself. And not only that, he plays the character with real humility. Yes, he is more or less portrayed as the omnipotent, I didn't pronounce that correctly, Candyman. But the thing is, earlier on in the film, as we well know, we are given a good, history about the character. He has an origin, and it is a very, very tragic one. And it's not often we have a thoroughly sympathetic monster. Actually, I would not call the Candyman a monster, because that's not true. Candyman was a man at some point. He was a living, breathing, loving human being. And therein lies the first major aspect of this film which appeals to me. Despite the fact it is a bloody and very sort of disturbing sort of thriller, if you can call it that, it's also a romantic tragedy. Everyone loves a romantic tragedy, and I think the reason why is that we can't accept something as all butterflies and rainbows. We have to have an edge of humility in there. We have to have, to use a very hackneyed term, dark and gritty edge to it. And that's what Candyman has. He was an artist. Here's another thing. Candyman was not a slave, okay? He was a free man. He was a very accomplished artist. He had a beautiful eye, and he just happened to fall in love with a white woman. Now, naturally, given the racial climate of the time, this was unacceptable. And he was hunted down like an animal, and he was mutilated and, eventually killed. It's a horrible, horrible thing. And for him to pursue the character of Helen... Now, let me just let you in on a secret. Well, I don't think it's a secret because I think everyone knows. But it's the ultimate fantasy for a woman. Okay, so Helen is this young, beautiful woman, and she's just on the verge of success with her thesis. It's also funny, just let me add this here. Just before Candyman shows up in that garage and first hypnotizes her, Helen Lyle is about to sort of, make it big. She's about to, have her name published. And it's just, the moment the Candyman shows up, that's when it all goes to hell, apparently. So getting back to the whole thing about, the whole fantasy thing, what is more attractive to a woman, fantasy-wise, about a dark, handsome man who only has eyes for her? Candyman is obsessed with her because she resembles his lost love. And towards the end of the film, this is another scene I really like, is when Helen reaches his lair and sees the little baby that's been abducted by the Candyman, presumably. And I'll get into that presumably in a second here. Candyman, like, picks her up and carries her to a slab, or an altar, if you will. And it's kind of like a nightmarish version of the two lovers consummating their love, okay? Complete with the hook going up the skirt and, like, the bee-stung kiss. It's just, that's the thing about Clive Barker. He is able to, make something transgressive almost romantic. And it really does appeal to our sense of inner perversions and our inner demons, I was going to use a very poor analogy concerning a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but I'm not going to do that here. But it's just it really is a power fantasy for a woman. Now, I'm only speaking for myself here, mainly, but when you think about it like that, Candyman is a romantic, tragic fantasy, going back to that. Now, what I said about Helen, like, apparently, or rather, Candyman apparently abducting the baby, the best thing about Candyman is this. You can watch this film numerous times over, and you can make up your own interpretation of it. Now, straightforward, the film is more than comfortable for you to accept that this is a young woman who's being haunted by this supernatural urban legend who's just come to claim her. But to me, upon a very recent viewing, I sort of have it in my mind that maybe all of the aspects in this movie is a result of Helen's psychosis. Helen is in that mental asylum all the way through. It sort of reminds me of the film Mulholland Drive, if any of you have seen it. The first part of the movie is seen as a fantasy from Naomi Watts' character, but in the second half of the movie, that's when it becomes a grim, dark, horrifying reality. And usually when it comes to the aspect of psychosis and trying to cope with it, people will sort of manufacture versions of events that happened. Now, I haven't thought too deeply about what exactly brought Helen into this sort of situation in the asylum, but I'm thinking it's something along the lines of this. So she comes across her husband cheating with the hot piece of ass from the class, and, something breaks. Something in her mind breaks, because she was always suspect of him philandering around on her. And in that scene in the movie when it's confirmed as a reality, like when she comes back from the asylum and the whole apartment has changed and in moves in the hot little piece of ass. And, it's a very sort of tense and kind of frightening scene because you're not quite sure as to whether or not Helen will lose it. I mean, she doesn't and she leaves, but, there is a couple of moments in that sequence when you're thinking, okay, she's probably going to take another knife and she's going to stab these two people to death. Okay, so coming back to the idea that Helen is in this mental institution all the way through, I'm thinking the whole thing about the Candyman and the death of her best friend and the abduction of the baby. Maybe this was something that she all conjured up in her head to sort of ratify why she's here. As I said, I haven't thought too deeply about this, but just going back about how this film is able to sort of play with your perceptions and make you think considerably deeper about what you are seeing on the screen, that is the mark of a truly great film. Now, of course, this film has been academically explored from the context of racial disparity and class and that sort of stuff. And you can find some really fantastic literature on the internet about this. I would be remiss if I were to discuss this in depth because I don't feel I have the appropriate knowledge to, convey. But let me just say this. What I love about the Candyman film is the fact that, even though the character of Helen, who's white, is pretty much the lead character, she is actually treated the way people of African American descent or any sort of minority is treated in the States or anywhere. Like I said, I am in no position to talk about this really, but it's really interesting. One of my favorite parts of this film is after when the Candyman, kills her best friend Bernadette, played by Cassie Lemons, she's on the ground and, she's crying and everything. She's suffering a psychotic break, basically. And later on in the film, actually, I'm not thinking about this correctly. Sorry. like I said, I have no idea what I'm doing. So remember with the sequence of which Helen is found in the character of Anne-Marie's apartment. Anne-Marie is a resident of Cabrini Green, where the Candyman is said to reside. And she wakes up and she's covered in blood. And she sees the head of a dog that's been cut off with a meat cleaver that she's holding in her hand. Okay, in the aftermath of this, when the cops come in and, arrest her and everything, there is this African-American cop who sort of like questions her. Now, this cop was actually featured earlier on in the film when Helen was beaten up in the toilet block by some of the Cabrini Green residents. Like, he treated her very sympathetically. You know, he was like, it's okay, we'll catch him and everything like that. You know, so she calls this cop in to help her. But, you know, in regards to the crime, you know, he is harsh on her. He's very... You know, he does what a good cop does. Like, he doesn't treat her with favoritism. Like, the way he sees it, she's guilty. She was there, she was holding the murder weapon, and the baby was missing. As far as he's concerned, she's done something really bad. And it's just, it's a great twist, really. Like, it's just... I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. So anyway, this is a really good film, and it really does sort of make you question what you're seeing on the screen. Another really great sequence for me in this film doesn't even feature the Candyman. It doesn't even like have any blood or any, straightforward suspense. It's actually very early in the movie when Helen is staying back at the college and she's typing up her thesis and everything. She's listening to the tales of the Candyman on a little dictaphone, and she talks to two female African-American janitors, and it's just a really well done scene because Helen is trying to grill them for information, like for her thesis. Like she wants to know more, and but the janitors are like very sort of, we don't want to talk about that. It's just a really well done scene. And Virginia Madsen, just like with Tony Todd, this has to be a fantastic performance in a horror film. Like, Helen is not a bad person. She's good. And it's because of that attachment that you feel to her that you were wanting to see her make her way through this. But she's still a very flawed person. She wants to know more about the world, but she is so naive about it by the same token. It's a very nuanced performance, and I don't feel any other actress could have possibly given it the power that Virginia Madsen has. So yeah, this is, like I said again, this is a great film, and I feel it only gets better upon subsequent viewings. So if I have to give Candyman a rating, here's the thing. I didn't think this film was that great upon first seeing it. Like, I saw it as a straightforward sort of, slasher with some good acting, but that's what age really does to you, doesn't it? It sort of, age in retrospect, it makes you go back and watch this film after taking into account about the other interpretations that you could take this movie as. And this whole thing about it being a romantic tragedy, that's what this film is for me. It is like one of the most romantic films ever, and I know that sounds really twisted, but just taking into consideration, like, what this story crucially is, like the finest center. This is a story between like two lost lovers. It's just told in a very perverse and very blood-soaked, sanguineous way. So yeah. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for enduring my bullshit, and as usual, I shall see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.